right. Hey, people, you beautiful people out there that's watching me, you conscious folks, you do-gooders, you nice people out there. I can tell because you watching me. I try to be a do-gooder, a good guy and all that stuff. And I have found my mission in life to help find people, to help ask questions so that we can understand a lot that has happened in the past, and then be able to use that information in our own way so that we're not caught off guard for what's going on today and what could happen in the future. And I'm going to do some more finding people to talk about our health, our wellness, some spirituality type component. I'm going to, and still have a Black history slant to it. I'm Anthony Brogdon. I'm sorry. I forgot to tell you who I am. I'm Anthony Brogdon. And I like y'all. I hope you like what I'm doing. So hit the subscribe button. It's free. It don't ask no information. It don't do nothing but let me know that you like me and you have taken another step to joining the Strong Inspirations family. Like this video, this guy right here, check it out. He an expert. He a scholar, and he's taking time out of his schedule to come on the channel to share some knowledge with you, my friends, and with me. I'm a better person since Strong Inspirations. I got a clear picture, and that's what I want to give you all, of what has happened. Because when I was in grade school, all I thought of was the Black history was the gloom and doom. You remember that picture they showed of that brother who they had whips on his back? I distinctly remember that. And the chains around the necks, I distinctly remember that. I don't know, did not know, was not introduced to some of the things that are of a good nature that have happened to us. And that's what we're going to bring to you. Like this video, hit the notifications bell, tell somebody about Strong Inspirations. Don't keep it to yourself. Did you see the video I did? I got a couple videos on the channel out of Hawaii. I ain't gonna lie to you, my friends, I have not been. I've been a lot of places, have not been to Hawaii. I found some Black folks. I found the guy who runs the NAACP chapter in Hawaii. He said, we got issues down here and we be fighting. Watch that video. And then the other one I got out of there, this guy right here has been to, I don't know, Africa 13, 14 times and a whole bunch of other places. And he talks about the ancient African civilizations. I'm taking you back before 1619. And he tells Black people ruled this world. We did. Look up the Moors. We're going to talk about that in some other videos and stuff like that. So, and then on a smaller note, did you see the one I did with the two great-granddaughters of C.H. Patterson? C.H. Patterson was a slave. He worked with them irons and stuff, was an astute, smart guy. When he got his freedom, he enticed his son and they opened up a car manufacturing company in Greenfield, Ohio, and was competing against Henry Ford for a little bit. Watch that video. Did you see the one? I know my guest, he's busy. But I got to tell you this one. Did you see the one I did with the gentleman who works at the H.J. Russell construction firm in Atlanta? H.J. Russell Construction? If you have not heard of him, watch that video. This brother right here, he's since deceased. Business been going 70 some odd years. He builds stadiums and skyscrapers and high rises. And his dad was a plasterer, and his dad said, hey, I've done it long enough. I showed you all I know. You take it from there. My man took it from there and did many hundreds of millions for a long period of time. Is a big fixture out of that Atlanta and around the U.S. of the astute Black business community, in particular Black enterprise. Feature them often. Watch that video. Now, you know, I got a movie out. I want you to watch my movie. I took 3 years out of my life to do this. And it talks about people like Herman Russell. The rise of Black business in America. The name of the documentary is Business in the Black. It's streaming on Amazon. It's 75 minutes long. It's going to blow your mind because I'm a mind blower, my friends. And then I did this book, Black Business Book. You got to get a copy. It's like the movie, but more thorough. I tell you all the ways slaves gained their freedom. I name all the HBCUs. I got 40 Black-owned banks in here. 30 or some odd Black-owned newspapers, the date they started and everything. And then I tell you about slaves who owned businesses. They did not tell me that in school, and I was a decent student. That would have inspired me beyond imagination. I want to inspire some kids, so every 10th book I sell, I donate one to a school. Help me in that campaign. And if you buy my book and you don't learn nothing new, I give you a money back guarantee. Boom, shaka-laka, my friends. If you know everything in this book, I figure, hey, you ain't got to do but send me an email. I knew all that. I ain't going to tell you to send the book back. Just give it to somebody else. But I'll give you your money back. I'm that confident. All that and more is on my website, businessintheblack.net. Now, you hear me use this term strong a lot. That defines my guest today. You ask anybody who know this gentleman, and they're going to say that about him. They're going to say strong, and I say it means this: strength, tenacity, resilience, and a sense of oneness, nobility, and grace. And as I have said that is my introduction to my guest today. Come on, strong man. So, brother, introduce yourself. Thank you for being on with me.
Thank you so much, Anthony. My name is Randall Maurice Jelks. I'm professor of African and African American Studies and American Studies at the University of Kansas in Lawrence, Kansas. Jayhawks, Will Chamberlain, Gail Sayers, you name it, Paul Pierce, who played basketball here, and so many other great people who are unknown to the public besides the athletes. So I've been at the University of Kansas since 2008.
All right, hey man, I appreciate that. They were all them people you mentioned. I like them guys. They were great in their field. I got to ask a couple questions about you, not nothing to real person. Where were you born and raised?
I was born in New Orleans and lived in New Orleans till I was 14. And my mother said jokingly that Louisiana was 49th in education and Mississippi was 50th. So we moved to Chicago when I entered high school. And then I went to the University of Michigan after graduating after high school. That's where I graduated from. I started at the University of Illinois, but I ended at the University of Michigan. And then I went to study theology at a place called McCormick Theological Seminary in Chicago. And then I went back to Michigan State University, received a PhD in comparative Black histories.
Oh, really? I love it. Okay, let's stay on that a little bit longer. Growing up in Louisiana, you remember? Did you grow up in a Black neighborhood and you could feel all that Louisiana?
Well, yeah. I mean, I grew up in a Black community, a very positive Black community, where most of my schools that I attended were named after Black people.
Oh, really? Okay.
Yeah, and my aunt taught history at Booker T. Washington High School in New Orleans. So yeah, I grew up in a strong sense of myself as a Black person in the city of New Orleans with all of its Black diversity.
Yeah. Black how about when you moved to Chicago? Same thing?
When I moved to Chicago, yeah. Well, Chicago then had 1 million Black folks.
Yeah.
So we were all over the place with 1 million Black folks at the time.
Did you talk to some elders? Did they tell you Black history stories? When do you think was the beginning of you wanting to choose this as a career path?
I think because I had grandparents. And my grandparents were around. My grandfather was born in 1898, and his parents were still alive in the mid 60s. So
Oh, really?
yeah, so they were very old. My grandparents, going back to the small rural towns that they were from, sort of gave me a sense of history. And if you grow up in New Orleans like I did, you walk past cemeteries above ground, you
Right.
think about history a lot because you know the dead have preceded you.
Right. Oh yeah, I can imagine. I've done that and actually walked through them because it was
Right.
kind of cute,
Right.
to see the tombstones above ground. Did you do you know where the plantation is in your family?
Oh yeah, I know where plantations are in my family, and I know a lot about my. This is the great thing of having grandparents again. I know a lot about my. I'm a descendant of one of the people. Maybe some of your people have heard about Georgetown sold slaves to keep itself afloat. They sold those slaves into Louisiana.
Yeah.
I'm a descendant of that sale. My other great grandparents were sold down the river, as they said back in the day, from Virginia into Louisiana. So there are lots of different traces of history all over. So I tell my students I'm more American than any of them.
Yeah. When you know this stuff and now you study it, um, you got a better understanding how they felt. How did Black people feel under those conditions? If you could imagine it in any regard, how
Well, I
scary
mean, of
was
course,
it or anything
well,
like
yeah,
that?
I mean, Black people always, this is kind of mythic, Black people always asserted their liberty wherever they could, and from all times and places. Whether it was the 18th century and they heard about Toussaint Louverture and the Haitian Revolution, Black people, since they came to North America, have asserted their freedoms. The politics may not have lent themselves to them getting their freedoms in the way they want, but they asserted their freedom. So my great grandparents on one side in 1872, the Civil War was over in 1865. In
Right.
1872, they had established a little Baptist church and a school next to it.
Oh,
So
really?
yeah, so in Morganza, Louisiana. So everywhere you look, Black people are asserting themselves. That doesn't make the history books because the history books, in point of fact, were written by people to subjugate another group of people.
That's right.
But having grandparents and having relatives that were older and living in a community, which many of us don't live in the same way anymore,
Yeah.
then I had a longer sense of history and a longer sense of myself.
Yeah. Well, because one of the things that I've come to conclude is that Black history, like I said, is not all gloom and doom. There was a lot of religious component that they had to rely on in those days. But then there were a lot of things that they did to overcome their circumstances, the
Well,
ways that they escaped and so on and
if
so
you
forth.
think about a group of people just really 7 years out of slavery and nobody gave them any money to
Right.
build their own church and school, well, that speaks volumes
No
right there.
question.
That speaks volumes that what they thought was really important to their lives. That speaks volumes. And I think oftentimes what we teach is the negative. As you were saying, in slavery, Black people maneuvered whichever way they could to find freedom. Now, if you're isolated on a plantation, you got a tougher road to hoe. If you're in
Yeah.
the city, you might work on the side and buy your freedom, like
Yeah.
Richard Allen did, and bought his family back from his slave owner in Maryland. He literally had to work by himself, by his family, and he's the founder. He's one of the founding bishops
Yes.
of the AME Church.
Yeah.
So I think that we teach the history, yes, one-sided. Slavery existed for 300 years. It wasn't just in the United States. It was through the Caribbean and all through South America.
Right.
So this was a kind of global system. And so we have to remind ourselves that under those circumstances, and sometimes you find yourself under oppressed circumstances, they continue to fight for their own freedoms.
Yeah, there are a number of stories that go along that same line. Well, what when you teach, what is your story? What do you like to teach the best? What
Oh, well,
and that
I
goes
mean,
into what you want to
what
talk
I
about
like to
here.
teach is similar to what you were talking about. So when I teach students about Jim Crow, I make them look up the population of the southern states at the end of the Civil War, so that Louisiana might have 50% Black people. So why would you want to resist people from voting because they would vote their own
That's
interests?
right.
Right. So people, individuals and communities started businesses. They formed unions. They formed other kinds of entities to make their lives happy, and they had their own sense of black black joy and freedom. They weren't all mealy mouth, and they built community. What I try to get young people to understand is community is this: somebody's not going to hand it to you. You have to create it. You have to sustain it. You have to build it, and they are building community, and it's Black people's very success at building community, at building their own base, is why Jim Crow came into being, is to blunt that, because they didn't want Black people with political power and force.
Because and we're gonna, as you just opened that one up, during the Reconstruction, we voted a bunch of Black people into political office.
Correct. And I'm not talking all in Washington. I'm talking about at the lowest level: the magistrate, the sheriff, the postmaster. All of these were important offices in the day-to-day lives of Black people. And more importantly, in Reconstruction, what Black people did was give the South, push the South to have public education, because precisely they understood that their children needed public education. And this became a bone of contention throughout the South.
Now, the Reconstruction period, and that's what we're talking about before we go into the Jim Crow, was like 7 years, isn't that what they call it?
I would say more than 7 years, although technically people say 1865 to 1877.
Yeah.
It's not till the 1880s that you really see the laws coming in, and Black people are resisting every which way they can the machinations of the dominance of the white planter class coming back into power. They are fighting and slows down. I mean, we forget that Plessy versus Ferguson, Homer Plessy, that was a whole community in New Orleans behind Plessy, fighting for their civil rights just in public transportation. So we have to remember that it's not, and it took Jim Crow from roughly, let's say roughly 1890 to 1910 for a 20-year period to really set in stone. It's a battle. And then some Black people decide to migrate for wages to the northern regions, and that help shapes a force that will fight Jim Crow as well. So Reconstruction lasts a little longer than we talk about, but it's a fight. But Black people are still building institutions no matter what, and that's it. Because I try to make students understand it's the institution that's going to take generations and generations. So the University of Kansas was founded, where I teach, in 1865. So you think about all the people who have come through since 1865. It's the institution that is that's going to keep people alive. It's not this individual success.
Right.
We can have a lot of successful individuals, but we don't control institutions.
You're on a point there, because one of the things that I do mention is that even before slavery ended, there were HBCUs.
Yes.
There was the Cheneys and the Lincoln and the Wilberforce.
Right. Yeah.
And then
the Lincolns and the Cheneys, the Lincolns and Wilberforce were founded by religious denomination and religious people. Wilberforce is important because it's founded by the AME Church in Ohio. And this is a really important institution because, but remember the AME Church by the 1850s, when Wilberforce is established, is an organization. It has a structure. It has a guiding principle. So it can go across country and spread and bring and build new institutions once the war is over in different regions. Edward Waters in Florida, this one, that one, Gammon.
Yeah.
Yeah.
And then right after the slavery ended, there were 3 HBCUs that opened, or 3 or 4 that opened 1865. Right. By 1870, there were how many? Maybe 10 HBCUs that fast?
Yeah, Morehouse is 1867. And Howard is around 1867, 65. Right. Yeah, I mean, you've got, again, the mindset was to establish institutions that would mold and shape children for the next generation.
But I guess the amazing thing is, for me, is you were in slavery. How do you have enough sense to do this? To operate a business, to operate
my grandparents told me somebody can control lots of dimensions of your life, but they can't control your inner self. So if you got an inner self, that's what they tried to keep control of. You know, like when you're playing sports, you say, well, I can control this part of the game. Maybe I can't control that, but you got to do what you can do. And they often pointed to the inner self first. I think Black people need to point to their inner self first. Who am I? What is expected of me? Whether I'm religious or not religious, what is expected of me? The inner self is so much, because, my granddad used to say, well, if you don't care about yourself, you won't care about another person. And that's absolutely true.
So true. Yeah.
They tried to control the best inner self. They knew they were enslaved. They knew they had to bide their time sometimes and to do the best they could under the circumstances. That's what we all do.
How could somebody, and I give you an example in this one, and I have them on the channel, the Piney Wood Boarding School out of Piney Wood, Mississippi. The guy who founded that he had a PhD somehow. And this is 1907, 1908.
Well, the thing is, the great W.E.B. Du Bois is documentary, empirically documenting the rise of Black education. Black people are doing all kinds of stuff, from trades to getting doctorates. It's fewer than it is today, but it was all kinds of the ways that people were trying to educate themselves and build their communities. Tuskegee Institute had all Black faculty,
Really?
Yes, Booker T. Washington hired an all Black faculty. I think people don't forget that. They talk about Booker T's speech, but Booker T behind the scenes is building up his community. He's building up the folks around Tuskegee and Alabama. So they have an all Black faculty. It's wonderful pictures of it.
When you were teaching in the class, do you have a go-to story that you say, I know I got them because I told them this one that they maybe never heard?
What to do today, I don't. What I really try to do is expose kids to young people, the young adults, I should say. I try to expose them to the primary material that we've been collecting for a long time of what Black people said they were doing at the time. So it's not just me giving a lecture to them, but I want them to read what they said sharecropping life was about. I want them to read what they said, Robert Sinstag said, when I'm trying to start the Chicago Defender. Right. I want to get them, because we have enough materials nowadays that they can read that and then ask questions about the period or what's going on in the period.
So you make them think. What does a good student do other than doing the work? Interpret what you said. It makes it a good grade. Is that the answer?
Oh no, I try to make sure. Good grades are always amorphous. I always tell people, when you graduated from college, nobody wants to know your grade point average.
That's right.
You can do the job or not.
That's right. That's
right?
right.
And it's important if you get good grades, and they're not minimizing that, especially if you want to go to get a master's or master's of business,
Right.
or go to a med school, law school. That's where it's important. But in the other arena of life, that becomes secondary. So if you want to be a master doctor, you want to be a brain surgeon such as Ben Carson, then you have to meet up to a certain criteria
That's
in
right.
that arena. But
That's
once
right.
Ben Carson was operating on brains with his best self, does he understand the technical things that
That's
he's
right.
doing? So I try to get students to say, why are you taking this course? One, you want to be a better citizen. Two,
Oh, really? I love it.
yeah, you want to be a better citizen. Two, you want to defy, people try to defy Black people by stereotypes. And there are all kinds of people in our community. I mean, at one time, even the criminals were given to the NAACP. I mean, we forget that there are all kinds of people in our community. That we got sinners and saints all sitting side by side. And sometimes the saints need the sinners' help, just like that. And
That's right.
and the sinners need the saints' help. So
That's right.
that they sit side by side with one another. And that's the beauty of our community. And what I'm always trying to get Black students to see is that they have nothing to be ashamed of, because so much in the society makes them feel ashamed. And I'm like, you have nothing to be ashamed of. You come from people who struggle, who fight, who organize in every different kind of forum there is.
Are you a mind changer, activist, a historian?
When I'm in the classroom, I'm a teacher. I want to teach them about the world they inhabit. How did we get here, right?
I love it.
You can't do that if you don't know some of your past.
Was there a particular topic, I don't know if we've reached on it, maybe we have, that you wanted to talk about today?
Well, I wrote a new book.
Okay, I definitely want to talk about that.
Right, yeah, I'm the author of 4 books. The first book I wrote is called African Americans in the Furniture City, The Struggle for Civil Rights in the City of Grand Rapids, Michigan. And I wanted to write that book because living in Grand Rapids, I once heard a kid said, there's no Black history here. And I was doing a little talk at a school and I said, oh no, there's Black history everywhere.
That's right.
What happens is it hasn't been dug up and it hasn't been put into a narrative. So I really worked hard at writing that very first book. It came out of being my dissertation, and I published it and won the Michigan History Society Award for that back in 2006.
I love it.
And then I wrote another book about HBCUs, but I focused as a biography of Benjamin Mays, who was the president of Morehouse College.
That's right.
From 1940 to 1967. And that book was called Benjamin Elijah Mays, Schoolmaster of the Movement, a biography. And then I'm always interested in Black folks' religion. I wrote a book back in 2019 about 4 different people in the Black community, 2 women, 2 men, called Faith and Struggle in the Lives of 4 African Americans. Ethel Waters, Mary Lou Williams, Muhammad Ali, and Eldridge Cleaver. And so I explore how they think about and live their religious lives from a male, from a female perspective, and so forth. Ethel Waters I always tell my students Ethel Waters was Beyonce before Beyonce.
Really?
Because she was on Broadway. She was the original vocalist of Stormy Weather. She made Black Swan Records sell like crazy. A Black-owned record company called Black Swan Records.
Yeah.
Like crazy. Because before they got Ethel Waters, they were just trying to do classical music, and suddenly they got Ethel singing, Stormy Weather, and boy, the sales went through the roof.
Yeah.
Like Motown, they can't keep up that in terms of production and other stuff like that. But for students to know that a Black vocalist sings a song that's a giant hit, and she did the shimmy, which is like backing that thing up.
Yeah, right. That's right.
They think these things are all new. I was like,
Yeah, that's right.
So I want, and Waters was deeply religious, and I wanted to trace that because we have a diversity of religion, and we all have arguments still to this day in barbershops and beauty shops about religion. And so tracing that part of Black life. And the final book I've just written recently came out back in January.
You got a copy right there?
Yes, I do. I hope
show them books, man. We plugging on this channel.
Yeah.
Yeah.
Called Letters to Martin.
Okay.
Meditations on Democracy in Black America. So
go ahead. Mm-hmm.
Part of the stuff that you are talking about, I use this format of writing like I'm writing to Dr. King, these letters to discuss the what was going on now, what was going on with him, and so students can learn it. And this came out of doing a talk at Elmhurst University, just outside of Chicago, and I wanted students to understand their realities by comparing it to King's realities.
What are some of those comparisons that you might cite?
Well, for instance, police brutality, the economic disparities. King was really very cognizant of economic disparity. People don't realize this, but he was also cognizant of what would it mean for automation to come along and displace Black workers, laboring people. So I wanted to write up all those things, and I wanted to write about King and women. Now, people write salacious things, but he has a relationship to his mother, his grandmother, his wife, to other women, and to gay people, Bayard Rustin. And so what are those things so that we could look at the humanity and think about ourselves in this moment in time? Black people have fought for democracy, and we don't get our credit and our due. And so I wanted to enter that discussion by using that format.
Yeah, I love that. And so often, I mean, the due that we do get, if it's any, is that we built the buildings and we toiled the soils and the farms and stuff like that. But there's so much more. And I even talked about it on the show.
By 1910, Black people were buying land at a rapid rate. The problem for us is that, and this is what Booker T. Washington tried to get better farming techniques. We had to fight in the 1920s the boll weevil infestation that hurt all cotton and all kinds of different kinds of farming. And so many Black people kept their land, but had to go to the up north for factories and for steady wages because farming wasn't doing that. And of course, we were subject to negative government policies against Black people in agriculture, but Black people did it all, right?
Yeah, and that's the one thing that I think would inspire us so much more if they were to teach those at the earlier grades. And is there a systematic system to keep us from knowing some of the things that you talk about?
Well, education has always been contentious, right? So I belong to an organization, and I think your listeners ought to belong to it too, called the Association for the Study of African American Life and History.
That's right. I'm familiar with them.
Right. It is the organization that Carter G. Woodson established and helped to establish, along with many others. It was where Black History Month didn't come along from some anonymous place. It came out of that remember the institutions out of that organization. The Association for the Study of Negro Life and History in 1926, Negro History Week started. It was held in Black schools for Black children so that they could learn more about their own history and where it's placed. Why it's put in February, that Negro History Week, was because Woodson wanted to place that Frederick Douglass had been born in February, Lincoln had been born in February, right. Washington had been born, and we are right in the middle of all of that conversation.
Yeah, that's right.
So that organization continues to go on. It is not just for people like me who have scholars, but right. It's also for people who ain't got no deed.
That's right.
You know, and that's oh, and that has always been the history of the organization. So it's important for us to keep in conversation for those who are just history buffs. People come. We're meeting in Montgomery, God willing, next week.
That's right.
I mean, on beginning on Thursday.
That's right.
Till Sunday. And people take tours. Who can, you know, particularly retirees, come and take tours of wherever we're meeting. We met in before COVID in Charleston, South Carolina. You know, Charleston, South Carolina is where our Statue of Liberty should be, because more slaves came to the port of Charleston, South Carolina than any other city.
Yeah, I know they built in the museum right there at the port.
That's correct. And that's why they're building that museum right there.
Yeah, I'm sure. Do you talk Black history every day, or for the most part?
Do I teach it every day?
Do you talk it every day?
Oh, well, I talk some dimension of it. You can't talk about you can't talk about the United States without talking about the presence of people of African descent being here. You can't talk about it at all. You can't talk about any of that at all. That would be you can't talk about without talking about indigenous people and all those African people that are here. 1 out of 4 people in North America was of African descent in the colonial era.
Oh, is that right? Yeah. I didn't know that. What does any of it bother you? The stories that you tell, or can you slant it to make it?
I mean, look. Anytime there is oppression, it's hard to stomach, right? Anytime people do wholesale harm to other people, that's a hard one to sell. I mean, I've been watching on PBS Ken Burns documentary, U.S. and the Holocaust. Anytime people do wholesale people, but Black people have our stories. Colfax, Louisiana, Thibodaux, Louisiana, massacres, wholesale, because what other people allow to happen is resentment, and they want to take and blame other people for doing good when they are not doing good. And sometimes you feel like because you're white, you're supposed to be doing good because you're just simply white. But other people might be doing better.
Right.
And that causes jealousy, anxiety, and we see it in the news all the time, right, at this present moment, in this present juncture in our society.
Is the term critical race theory new, or had it been used in the past and now just resurfaced?
Yeah, historians don't use critical race theory as much. Critical race theory certainly came out of the law, and it came from Black lawyers trying to think about Judge Robert Carter, who was a U.S. federal judge, and who would go on to be the Court of Appeals. Judge Carter, look, he was with Marshall, Thurgood Marshall, and Constance Baker Motley, and he's like, okay, we fought for this thing. What is it? What is the structures that are keeping Black people back? So they began to think about what are the structural elements from a legal point of view that are keeping Black people from having success. Okay, of course, we fought for quote unquote to end school desegregation, which really was the end of Plessy v. Ferguson. But why was this so steadfast? Bell, Derek Bell, lawyer, thinking about these structural issues. Historians might think about those issues slightly different, but it's critical race theory becomes a buzzword for politics, and it's very it's used in a partisan way to attack like people are harming your kids. And I tell people all the time, your kids are, look, I grew up with a family that read the Bible. And if you want to protect your kids, you probably shouldn't read particularly the Hebrew scripture side of the Christian Bible, what Christians call the Old Testament, because it's some serious violence going on. It's rape.
Is that right? I didn't know that.
It's rape. It's mayhem. It's other things. It's kings. It's jealousies. It's when you read so the idea, the very idea of people saying, "Oh, I want to keep my children's innocent." Well, that's not going to happen.
Yeah.
History is messy.
Yeah, and it is the truth.
Yeah.
Let
me say this.
Go ahead.
I've lived in West Africa on 2 occasions. And so on 2 occasions, one of the things you have to understand is Europeans negotiated with African monarchies. See, this is about African powers to sell slaves. So in the Woman King with Viola Davis, part of that is correct. You have to negotiate with your adversary. They didn't go and take over. It wasn't until the revolutionary in weapon technology, the Maxim gun, the repeater gun, that overwhelmed African forces, because Africa people fought the Europeans because no monarchy wants to be taken over or run over and so forth. So we have to understand the complexities of this, and this is what I try to get my students to understand.
One of the things that, and I hear people, and I tell you, I wouldn't mention his name, but I got a good buddy. He can live in a big $400,000-$500,000 house, what have you, right? And he's successful businessman. But then his complaint is we have not gone that far as Black people, because we hear the noise, the students, the police brutality that is on the rise, what have you. But we are a long way from where we were.
Of course. Why? Look at this discussion we're having. So we wouldn't have been having a public discussion like this even 50 years ago, 60 years ago, 70 years ago, 80. Yeah, because this was being seen as, if we did this in the 1950s, having such a frank conversation, this was seen by threat to the society. J. Edgar Hoover would have been all over, both of you.
Really?
Yeah, that's right.
And so we can use that as a marker just in itself.
In itself, yes, there are really grave structural issues with public education, but that also affects white kids too. It's not just our kids, so it's affecting them too. Because without a sustainable public education system, how do we get the least kids something? Always, there are going to always be kids like my children have had advantages that average white kids didn't have, because I was a university professor.
That's right. Yeah. No, I mean, I like it that you said that. What is the best place for Black people, or the best that we have had in any time period? Is that now?
No, it's always now. It was now in 1865. Now was the time, and just like today, now is the time. I don't think we are here at this moment, and we must make the best of it now. And we have to recognize the faults, but we also have to build the way for the next generation. And sometimes what happens is I get my 500,000 house or my 1,500,000 house, and I don't think about the next generation, how to build for the next generation. It can't just simply be about me, because we've always had Black people with money. That's documented. Not as many as we have today, but we've always had Black people with money. But if we don't have institutions their money is going to be unprotected. That's why we built NAACP to last over 100 years. That's why we built an urban league. We have to have institutions that we build upon. And we can't just simply blame it on solely on the individual. Everybody has individual responsibility, but we can't just blame it on solely the individual.
A couple more questions, and then one of them is because you said you lived in Africa. Where is the best place for a Black person to live? If you can, yes.
Well, I mean, you know,
I don't know what to qualify it, but I'm just saying.
No, I mean, like I lived in Ghana on 2 occasions. I think Ghana is the point of entry that most Black people go to on the African continent,
right?
West Africa. One, because it has intact the fortresses and slave fortresses that people were sold from, so people visit. But to and the Ghanaian government has been more than open to Black Americans. So I would think that would be one part. But you're really different than we're a different tribe, and I say that with all love because I love me some Ghana. But we're a different tribe. People speak different languages. They have nuances that we don't know. We're Americans, and we need to realize that, but also learn something about what they're going through in the now. Not they're like us. They weren't there in 1482 when the first when the Portuguese and the people in the central state central region of Ghana established Elmina, the castle that stands for the mind. Nobody was there in 1482, 10 years before Columbus. Nobody there. All of those systems got into place. So we're all participating. The problem for in my mind, most Africans don't know about their own African history. So the same thing that we say about Black America is also playing out on the African side.
Yeah, that's what I've come to conclude, because I've had some people from Africa on the channel. We've taken a little turn here, and I want to do one more on that turn. If you taught a class at a high school in Chicago, predominantly Black class, the boys got their pants on their butt, the girls ain't paying attention, and you the first day, what would you think you would say to them to say, hold on, and I'm gonna talk about Black history in this regard. What might you say to them so that they will perk up and listen, and you might have their attention for that semester?
Well, I wouldn't say anything about their appearances.
Yeah.
I would begin with, let's go to the nearest public library we can go, and let's go find something about our neighborhood where we live. And once we find out something about how our neighborhood changed, what was it like, maybe if you lived in Detroit, the highway went through your neighborhood.
That's right, it did.
Changed it. So you really want to get them to start understanding where they're at, and then the other things about relationships, clothing, aesthetics, because Black aesthetics is, one time we wore zoot suits.
That's right.
And of course, the zoot suit was seen by police officers as a threat. So
really,
yes, that's right. In California, there was the famous zoot suit riots, Mexicans and Black people, because the guys wore the zoot suits. So its clothing is ever changing. So what we want to get them to understand is, what's our context? What's your current aesthetic? I have a good colleague and friend, Tanisha Ford, who writes about kind of Midwest women's aesthetic. She's a historian, and clothing. We have to take all of that into the account, and we reshape fashion all the time. We reshape fashion all the time. But we don't make no money off of it half of the time.
Yeah.
And that's been part of the problem. So I would suggest that we think about, I would not talk young people about their clothing, but try to get them to think about what's the context for their community that they already live, and then we can go out further than that.
I
What
love
was
it.
the context 80, 90 years ago when Chicago, all Black people were crushed in what we call the Black Belt of Chicago? Uh, and then we can talk about why Richard Wright wrote Native Son, about Bigger and what that crushing do. Or we can read about a single Black mother when Ann Petrie, a novelist, writes about Ludi in a novel called The Street. So we can then imagine and say, oh, this is related to me. I can see how the pressure of living without resources or being trapped in puts pressure on and anger on us, so that we can expand the horizon.
I got one more. Is there a person, historic figure, now, and I'm not asking your parents or whatever, that you admire the most that people don't know of?
Well, even the people who they think they know of, they don't know of, right? To be a scholar, I think most of my generation is chasing the great scholar, the great American intellectual W.E.B. Du Bois, who wrote Souls of Black Folks and so many other books. I mean, he's just a giant in there. I think there are so many other people. You know, I had a wonderful dissertation advisor. Her name is Dr. Darlene Clark Hine, and she wrote on Black women and taught me that you can't not have a history with only you talking about Black men, that 51%, 52% of your community is Black women. So it's important for us to, and I was lucky to have Black role models even at the graduate level.
Yeah, I love it. Is it how do people follow you? Do you got a website, or
I have a
and then
website.
how do we get the books and that kind of thing?
Yeah, well, I have a website called randallmauricejelks.com.
Okay.
And well, you can see my name in the little thing,
Yeah.
randallmauricejelks.com. You can find me on the website of the University of Kansas in my respective departments. You can find me on Twitter at Dr. Jelks. You can find me on Instagram at Randall Maurice Jelks underscore author. And you can, underscore books, or my regular Instagram, Dr. Jelks on Instagram. You can find me on Facebook, most social, even Snapchat.
Yeah. Oh my God, you really are up on date.
Well, I hang out with young people all the time, so I got it.
Yeah, I don't do Snapchat. I don't even do TikTok. I'll be honest.
Well, I haven't mastered TikTok. That is beyond me, but I do try to keep up with them.
So I got this a good one for you. You're proud of yourself for what you have taken this to. Because did you think you were going to be a historian when you were 14 or in undergrad? Is this a course that you thought of?
When I was about 19, I had decided that I was going to get a PhD. Yeah, well, I was about 19 years old. I decided that I wanted to be engaged in the interpretation of how Black people thought about themselves. And lucky for me, timing is everything. Lucky for me, I could establish a career in academics. But that's what I always wanted to do, and I wanted to be a writer. So I could do both of those through my discipline.
I got one more, my man, and I don't mean no harm in this. You a cool dude, right?
I don't know.
Growing up, being a cool dude meant that you had to read and write in good grades. How did you not let the influences of being so cool take you away from that to doing uncool things, or not sitting in that room by yourself reading and writing and going out and playing all the time? You follow what my question is?
Like, I was a typical boy. I wanted to go. I was out playing as much as I can, but God is good, and I say this in my mother, um, you know, uh, paved the way for me, and I mean that every Saturday I had to go to the library. She didn't care
I
what
love it.
she didn't care what I brought home. She just wanted me to read. So I would read all the books about sports, and then eventually you're gonna like, oh, let me read this and let me read that.
Yes.
And so my mother really paved the way for me. And I say, having the extended family, I think people, however you put that together, having that extended family where you have the old and the young together is really important because, again, my grandparents told me stories, and they intrigued my imagination. My grandmother told me, like, I was baptized in the Mississippi River in 1918 by Reverend Sweet. And, I could imagine it, and way she told it to me, and imagine these stories. So whatever you can, not all of us are fortunate to have that kind of
Yeah.
relationship, but whatever you can, old old people need to be around young kids because they can give some wisdom and facts that young kids also need, and you need all of those in community. That's all a part of education. My education, I wasn't a great student, and my mother was always very furious at me because she thought I should have been an all A student, but I was doing other things. I was reading books. I was um, going to explore things like when we moved to Chicago, the Museum of Science and Industry, the Oriental Institute, trying to go look at everything. Because I always tell my students, this is one part of learning in the classroom, but the learning is outside the classroom. And I'm lucky enough, I went to high school with some really sharp Black kids, and I learned so much from them, and in a healthy way.
I got you.
So that's and I just was fortunate enough to grow up with people who had parents who, when you walked in the door, they were going to ask you what you were trying to do with your life, even if you're 14 years old and you're like, what?
Yes.
Yeah, so
I
that was,
love it.
yeah.
Because I got one more. When and I heard this and saw it in the movie when when Thurgood Marshall was in law school, they made him sit outside of the classroom.
Well, he never, no, Thurgood never went to the University of Maryland and he refused to meet with the
Not Frederick
university.
Douglass. I'm talking about Thurgood Marshall.
Thurgood Marshall.
Yeah.
Thurgood Marshall never went to the University of Maryland. He went to Howard, and at Howard University, the dean when he came in was a man, Black lawyer. Everybody should know about Charles Hamilton Houston.
That's right.
And Charles Hamilton Houston kicked everybody's butt at Howard Law School to make them the best group of lawyers coming in and out of that law school. The care that Houston gave to Black intellect, that we have to give the care to the Black mind, that your mind is just important as if you can see the a 40-foot jump shot. That's just, your mind is equally. And athletes are like, I'm using athletes because that becomes the predominant, but all of the athletes, both women and men, are highly intelligent. And so we need to, open up the window and talk about the history of athletics, talk about over time the history of sports. So this is all ours.
I love it.
Ours to claim.
It is my last one. Is there a question that I have not asked you that you wanted to share of something?
No, I think your audience should know that that Black history has its sadness and its triumphs, just like all history has. And I want to repeat, Black people have nothing to be ashamed about.
Love it.
Well, what we need to do is continue to explore, and and that's for every Black people. I'm highly democratic here. Black people have been gay, straight, God-fearing, godless, we've been the whole thing, and we deserve all of that to be studied like any other community has itself studied, and take joy and pride in that, and choose what side you want to be on. You know, I
Yes.
mean, but I just want to make sure that we do that for
Yes.
for our community.
Yes. Hey, man, I appreciate you coming on a whole lot.
I
And
appreciate
sharing
you
about your
inviting me.
books. Yeah, sharing about your books and
Because you
everything,
you
brother.
you talk to an audience that I don't talk to all the time. So
Yeah,
I appreciate you for
yeah,
who you talk to and who is subscribing to your show. And
yeah,
that's a very great, from the bottom of my heart,
yeah,
appreciation too.
yeah. Because you come out and do what you've done. Everybody's strong inspirations. I told you you're gonna like this. And he
So
talked
thank you.
about himself personally. This
Yeah,
became more than the history. It became how you became who you are.
well,
Everybody,
part
yeah,
of
yeah,
part of
that's the
that.
story.
Yeah, that is a story.
Yeah, that's the story.
Yeah. Well, one of these days I'll write that too.
Yeah, you're right there too.
Yeah.
Man, everybody hit the subscribe button on Strong Inspirations. Hit the like button on this one. I know you liked it because he put it in layman's terms. Hit the notifications bell. Tell somebody. And go get his books. Get all of them. They're on Amazon and that kind of thing.
Yep, they're Amazon, and if you
Yep,
got a local bookstore, I always recommend you go to local bookstore,
yep. Go to local
because
bookstore.
local bookstores give writers and historians and other people an opportunity to actually talk to real live people. So I
Yeah,
recommend wherever you can get it from,
yeah,
get it.
yeah. There you go. Do that, everybody. Follow this gentleman because I know he's lecturing and speaking in public forums and that kind of thing. You might want to hear him up close and share his thoughts. And I say this to you, my brother, and I mean this with all sincerity. I really do. I want you to stay strong, stay safe, stay on your grind. I love the man you've become, what you do down there in Kansas, and you teaching them kids, you opening up the eyes to all races for them to think a little bit more objectively, so on and so forth, about what we have come through. We've been through those things, and we survived those things. Some of us, it cost our lives, but we did, and it's over. And now we on to something else, a different kind of fight, different kind of shade to it. And you telling this. Appreciate that.
I
Everybody,
appreciate
with
it.
that, I'll say, yeah, man, appreciate it. Bye-bye, we out. Peace.